Thank you, Tom. Thank you, John, for inviting me to do here, to come and speak. It's very nice to see everybody, and I see that as soon as I walked in the door, I had 4 questions before I got to this table. So if you'll remind me what those questions are later on, I'll be happy to try and answer them for you. If we can just kill the screensaver, the machine needs a password. Anybody know what the password is? That would put a stop in the whole thing right there if we just couldn't turn it on. Perfect. Okay, thank you. First point I would like to make is I do not consider myself a Photoshop ninja. That was a name that was given to me by John, who has probably now walked out. But I do have, thank you. Excuse me. I do have a lot of experience. To give you a little bit of background, I started off as an illustrator, and then I went to advertising, and midway through my career, I discovered photography, initially as a hobby, but since I'm creating advertising all the time, there are many instances where we need to shoot our own things. We don't have time or budget to hire out a photographer and get something done, so we need to shoot it ourselves. So with that, I'll continue. Okay, now, that's fine. A little light is okay. I'm sure all of you have as many cameras as there are here. People like Olympus, people like Canon, Nikon, Canon debate goes on and on. People spend gobs and gobs of money on cameras. This is the camera that I've shot almost everything with, which was, I think, about $500, not counting the lenses. It's a Canon T2i. It's only 12 megapixels. It's not the top of the line, but you'll see what kind of things I've done with it. The expense of the camera is not necessarily the most important thing. Recently, however, I found one of these in my office, which is a Canon 5D. Very big, very heavy, very high-end camera, but essentially does pretty much the same job as the other one. The images are just a little bit bigger, and there are a few more lenses that fit this one that my other couldn't handle. These are the lenses that I use. People are usually curious what sort of lenses people choose. There's tons of them out there. The one on the left is a Canon 50 millimeter. That lens is about $100, and it gets beautiful depth of field. It's, again, not expensive, not fancy, but it really does the job. And the one on the right, although I realize now the picture you could barely see up in the right-hand corner, is a Sigma 18-250. And these I use for my family photos and for professional work. The 18-250, Canon doesn't make something that's quite that much of a range. This one, I think the lens is about $300. But between these two lenses, I've shot pretty much everything for the last 10 or 15 years, with a couple of minor exceptions. So you don't need to spend a ton to have great images. It's in what you do with them. Okay. Studio lighting. And I'll just touch through this quickly and get to Photoshop. A lot of the things that I do are not particularly shot in nature or outside. I know everybody has various things that they shoot, where they prefer to shoot, how they prefer to shoot. A lot of the things that I do are in a photo studio where I have strobe lights hooked up to a trigger that's connected to the camera. That's on the right. It's called a Pocket Wizard, and it basically just goes right into the hot shoe. And when you shoot the camera, the lights go, and whatever they're connected to can light your subject. And I'll get into some, and the one on the left, it's a 500-watt light. This is a drone. I don't know if anyone has ever seen one, worked with one, used one, bought one for their kids, their grandkids, whatever it is. They're a lot of fun, and you can take very, very unique images and video from the air. I don't have much that I use it for professionally. Mostly it's for fun, but you can get some really interesting shots with a completely different perspective and a completely different point of view. There are actually places you could rent these if you don't want to go through the expenditure, because they can be a little bit pricey. But if you ever get to rent one for a weekend or a day, and you can go out in the park and you shoot things from way up in the air, it's a lot of fun. Okay, so that's that. This is a GoPro, which those of you who may not know, it's a very small camera. It can be mounted anywhere. You see a lot of athletes and cyclists and skiers doing all point of view sort of pictures and video. So I experiment a lot with that. And a lot of times I'll take still shots with that. It can take still and video. Or you can take video and, of course, pull a frame out of it. You get some really interesting different shots with that, too. And the last, which I will show for those who are interested afterwards, this is called a RED camera, which is actually This is the type of camera that they shot Lord of the Rings trilogy and a lot of other big theatrical movies. This is a camera, and my company happens to own one, and there's no one else in the office who knows what it is or how to use it. So this has become mine. I have to return it, but it's a lot of fun to play with. It is for those who know anything about video, it shoots 6K video. They use these in space and all kinds of things. It's great. Okay, now, working in Photoshop. How many people here work in Photoshop or have experimented with it? Everybody, okay. How many of you use a mouse when you work on the computer? How many of you use something other than a mouse? Tablet? Wacom tablet, right? Okay, Wacom tablet, exactly. It was explained to me a long time ago. For many years I was using the mouse. I wasn't even aware that the tablet existed. And then somebody showed it to me and changed my world. And they gave me a great quote. I quote a friend of mine. He said, drawing with a mouse is like drawing with a bar of soap. If you think about it, if you're trying to draw, because that's essentially what you're doing, is you're drawing in Photoshop. If you tried to draw with a bar of soap, that's about the kind of control that you can have. Working with a Wacom tablet, you can have, they're pressure sensitive. So those of you, there are inexpensive ones on the market. Again, my company happens to be able to pay for higher end ones. But even for $100 or $150, you can get something that's decent, that's pressure sensitive, and you can do all sorts of beautiful things with your images. Okay, so I'm sorry?
How do you spell it?
Oh, W-A-C-O-M, Wacom, which is the company that makes it. There are other companies that make them too. They're kind of the top of the line, the one that most people know and use. Okay, this is my setup at my desk. For those who are able to, again, afford and set this up, this is a really great thing to have. One large monitor and then a couple of small monitors on the side. This happens to be pretty big. It's about as big as most of the TVs in your house. And I sit this far away from it all day, every day. Not great for the eyes, but it's really nice when you're working on images to be able to see them very, very large. Okay. And then the two smaller ones, of course, because I'm doing advertising work as well, so I need a lot of real estate. But that's basically my equipment list. Now, getting into the actual Photoshop work. Okay? This is a book cover that has not yet been printed. It's nearing completion. But I wanted to use this as a sort of a case study and take you through how I go about starting from scratch, going to a finished piece of advertising or photography. In this case, it's a book cover. Now, let's see here. So this is the finished piece. I know it's a little tough to see. Maybe we can, we'll leave the lights the way they are now. Okay. Now, if I can, I may need help for a second just to getting over to Photoshop here. We'll open this up. Bless you. Here we go. Now, of course, I know a lot of people are not producing images particularly for advertising. That's going to be added with type and things like that. But you'll see a lot of techniques in here that you can use to enhance your own photographs. All right. Okay, so this is the, sorry, just taking a moment here. There we go. All right, now, so this is the finished piece, which is our dog Scout here on a little cliff with a forest fire going on behind him. And of course, we could not put a dog in the middle of a forest fire and ask him to pose for a picture. Cannot be done. We wouldn't even try. There was a quote a long time ago, I think it was W.C. Fields said, "I will never work with children or animals." We were forced to work with an animal. It was a well-behaved dog, but it was difficult. And what we did was we brought him into our office later in the day when fewer people were there, and we set up lights, set up a studio, we set up some blocks and things for her, it's actually a female dog, to jump up on. And she would jump up and jump down, and jump up and jump down, and go everywhere that a dog would go, and we had a little thing of water, and she was going back and forth. It was very hard to get her. So what we did was two things. A, we had our movie camera. So we had our movie camera going full time, which shoots 70 frames a second or 80 frames a second, just following her around, trying to get that pose as she turned around the room, looked, and hey, look over here, jingling toys and all kinds of things. And then I had our Canon 5D that I was trying to get stills as well. We had lights on in every which direction, and we never know which way would she be behind the lights, would she be next to the lights, so we didn't really know. So what we did, and I'll apologize for jumping around a little bit, this image we started off with a stock photo. Has anyone purchased stock photography or know how it works or have ever used it? In addition to your own images, of course, there's images that you can buy to add to them. It's legal, you can pay for them, and there's free options as well to add textures, a little light effect, things like that. Some people are purists. They just want what came out of their camera affected, and that's done. When we're building something like this, we have to use a lot of tools at our disposal. So we certainly weren't going to go out and photograph a forest fire. Keep in mind that this was all done in a single afternoon, so other than the dog photo shoot. So we had a photo of this forest fire, and then we got a photo of these rocks. Now the rocks were shot bright in the day, okay, not at night, not lit by fire, just with a blue sky behind them. So we need to make adjustments to them. Sorry, jumping around a little bit. So we added reds and yellows to that, added the dog in, added some of these, what's the word? Embers, right? Thank you. Embers floating up from there, okay? And put the dog and our type work that we did. Some more embers. Coloration, we'll talk about that in a minute. Some more coloration. Some more levels. And there's our finished piece. Now what I'm going to do shortly is I'll go through more specifically what we actually did. But this is how we build a piece of artwork from the ground up, from the back, coming forward, 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 and adding all sorts of colorations to it. Okay? Now, one of the things that John had mentioned to me that some people were interested is using Lightroom and using Bridge and maintaining the integrity of your original photographs. And most of the cameras that we use, I'm assuming the cameras that you use, shoot in a format called RAW, R-A-W. Is everybody familiar? I see a lot of heads nodding. People are familiar with RAW. Does anybody know what that actually means? The difference between RAW, JPEG, TIFF, EPS, PSD, all these different things. I see some heads going like this and some heads going like this. Okay, those of you who do know, please bear with me. I'm just going to try to enlighten some of the other folks. When a digital camera takes a picture, it takes in lots of information. All of the light that's in the area, in the darkest spots. If I were to take a picture right now, some of the people who have black shirts and black sweatshirts, even in my eye, it just kind of fades into black, especially when the lights aren't fully on. What the RAW format does is it reads so deeply into that image that you're able to draw out highlights that you didn't even know were there. So when you shoot something in RAW, it allows you, even though it might not be the brightest day or it might be too bright, you're able to bring back a lot of these a lot of the details that you think you've lost. Other formats such as JPEG, which a lot of people will email JPEGs because the files are smaller, it erases all that information, and you aren't able to draw it out. So when we shot, her name is Butterscotch here. When we shot Butterscotch, we shot in RAW, and what I'll do now is take you through what we were able to do with the RAW interface. And bear with me here. Does anybody have any questions so far?
What's the cover line over the book title?
Oh, that's the author's name. Yeah, it's okay. I'll zoom in.
Effect on an illustrator?
Move this down. The type. Here we go. Jennifer Lee Schatz. Jennifer Lee Schatz, who's a children's author. This is like for young adult, 8 to 12, something like that. This type was actually set right in Photoshop. And the nice thing about setting type in Photoshop is you can make your image larger and smaller, and the resolution will go with it. So you don't get blurry type. The type will stay crisp and sharp whether you make the image larger or smaller. Okay, now, whoops, here we go. So what I'm going to do is, let's go. Go ahead.
Do you have, what's the dog's name?
It's Butterscotch.
Do you have a finished butterscotch as it came out of the camera?
Yes, that's what I'm going to take you to next.
When you bought the stock photo, was it more expensive because you said it was going to be used for a book cover?
Good question. Question was the stock photo more expensive because we're going to be using it for a book cover? There are two basic categories of stock photography that you can buy. There's rights managed and royalty free. Royalty free, and I'll go through, and it's on the handout sheet where I get my stock photography from. Royalty free means a photographer has taken the shot and they basically sign on with a stock photo company and they sell it. Could be $5 an image, could be $10 an image, could be $1 an image based on what your account with them is like. And they're hoping for volume. They're hoping they take a shot of a blue sky, everybody wants it, and they're going to get $1 every time everybody takes it down. That's called royalty free. And anybody can use it, manipulate it, put it on a poster, put it in the newspaper, anything you want. Rights managed means the photographer retains the rights to the image, and they want large sums of money each time that it's used. More so used for if you need a shot of George Clooney, if you need a shot of a particular building that's not sort of public domain. And they can be very pricey. But with advertising budgets, we could pay $500 to $5,000 for an image. We've done work for, as I said, big celebrities. I've done movie posters for the movie studio that they have their own photography of the actor on set, but they don't have the expression that they want. So they say, okay, go see if you can find a stock photo of them, and they'll pay an additional $5,000 to get the particular smile that they want. Again, these aren't people paying out of their pockets. This is, it's corporate money, so it does make sense to them.
I'm sorry, what is
Please,
the
go
name
ahead.
of it? Not royalty free.
Rights managed. Rights managed.
Was the vest that was the dog actually wearing that vest?
Yes. No, it's a combination. We did have the vest. This was the book publisher for this who arranged this. We got the dog, but they had requested the photo shoot. They had some sort of source to have somebody either make that or buy it. The little patch on the side says Scout, which is the name of the book. I think they had that made. They had that custom embroidered. The vest, I think you can buy those at military supply places, something like that, or maybe pet stores. I'm not sure. We had it. Now and I'll show you. We've colorized this. It was originally tan, and the American flag patch was actually red, white, and blue, and we colorized it to match all of this. So going down here. Now the shot that you see of this dog is not one photo. There are about 10 photos of her in her. As I said, very difficult to get her to do the exact pose that we wanted. So we were able to achieve it where the hind legs were from one shot, the right leg was from another shot, this paw was from another shot, the head was, I don't know how many are in here, but it's definitely in double digits. The vest, the Scout, and then all the colorization that we did afterwards. And then even from that point, take this ear and stretch it this way a little bit, and her nose is like that, and this eye looks like it's looking over here. So much manipulation has to go in to get a finished image like this. So, what I will show you now...
It was really a cat when you saw it.
Exactly. Exactly. Now you see? Okay. So, this is the paw. Just that front left paw, and I don't know if that's my hand or my boss's hand holding it still, but you can also see, and I'll try to point up here, a piece of the harness is coming down this way. There's like a piece of fabric that was coming off of the harness blocking that part of the leg. And then, of course, we had our fingers wrapped around her paw, holding it still, because she didn't listen. We kept saying, keep your paw up, and she looked at us like she didn't speak English. That's it, W.C. Fields, Children and Animals. Oh. Is that, I see. Neat. Okay. Yeah, so right here, right, there's a thing, and of course the fingers. I'm sorry. Right here, and then of course the fingers holding the leg, and then obviously we're going to have to graft this onto the rest of the other parts of the body. So let's see. I'm just taking. All right. Now, here we removed those fingers and added fur over that, and there's a tool. Let me ask you this before I go any further. How many of you have actually done photo manipulation beyond making it brighter or redder? Actually, people know what rubber stamping is? Yes? Some do, some don't. Okay. Photoshop is a phenomenal tool. And I will tell you, I've been using it for close to 20 years, or maybe more than 20 years at this point. And even I don't know all that it can do. I have my set processes and toolboxes that I use within it. But each year that they come out with a new version and a new this, and now it can do that. And I go, hey, I don't need that. I already know what I'm doing. So my learning has kind of hit a wall, but I'm able to achieve what I need to achieve with the tools that I have. Very valuable, which is called rubber stamp. So if you have, for instance, you take a portrait and somebody has a pimple, or they have stubble, or they have a wrinkle, or crow's feet, or whatever it is, you're able to sample from something that's next to it and replace that, and all of a sudden the blemish is gone. You can do this. See, I don't even use the patch tool. I'm not even sure how it works. But rubber stamp works for me. That's the other thing, is for every task that you need to do, they have 3 ways to do it and 6 ways to modify it. So I've made my choices over the years. I know what I'm comfortable with. I know that what I'm able to achieve with those tools. Can I do every single thing under the sun? No, but it gets me by. So we have the paw. We scrub out those fingers. We scrub out those fingers. And we scrub out the harness there. Okay, so I'll try and keep my head down.
What do you mean scrub out?
It's called rubber stamping. And what that is essentially is copying a little piece of fur here and placing it over there. Copying a little piece of fur here and pasting it over there, and then whatever I need erased is gone. Whether it's a pimple on a face, or in this case, a dog harness on a leg.
Is that the same as the clone tool?
Clone tool, thank you. Yes, it's also called the clone tool. That's the other thing. Every tool's got 6 names, too. Very difficult to teach this thing to somebody. Photoshop, that is. Excuse me 1 second.
Maybe you said, is this a professional dog model or is this somebody's dog?
This is my boss's friend's dog.
Did you get she get a royalty?
She got paid quite well. Her owners got paid quite well for this. I'll tell you just a short story. The plan for this was Scout, was it fire rescue dog? This was supposed to be the first in a series of 3 books. We were hoping to get every shot we need for all 3 covers in one sitting. We had a very clear vision of what we wanted for this first cover, that great pose with the paw up, which we tried over and over and over to get, which means we didn't get a hell of a lot of variety. So when we start on the 2nd and 3rd book, I have a feeling we're going to be calling them back in. But they got paid for 3 books. So we're hoping that when we call them in, they'll do with a bone and a lunch, perhaps. Okay, so now, do people know what masks are? Or layer masks, vector masks, things like that? Okay. You'll see, and let me see if I can't really zoom in on that because that's the menu. All right. Right here, you have what looks like a little folder, and then right next to it is a black square. There's a red X through it at the moment, but you see there's other ones without a red X. That's a little black and white sort of picture. What that allows you to do, is cut away what you don't want from an image. So for instance, if someone were to take a picture of me right now, where I'm standing, and you wanted just me, and not the wall and the stand and the lights and the this and that, Photoshop allows you to cut around with a variety of different tools, soft to do hair, and I can talk about that in a minute, sharp if it's you're doing the edge of a car or a chair or a table, something like that. All sorts of things, and basically extract it from its background, and then you can put other things behind it, which if we go back to the original image, that's how I got her. Well, we'll go back to it in a minute. The dog separated to put in front of, because she was shot here. There's a gray screen behind her. This was just a big gray piece of fabric we had hung up, shooting against gray, shooting against green. A lot of times in video they shoot against green. People know green screen, right? And they can, in video, you can just drop something else behind them. So getting back to her. So this mask, so it's just that leg. We erased everything else. We weren't going to use anything else from this portion of it.
What tool did you use for that?
Okay, that's called a layer mask. And what that is... I'm sorry?
Was it a quick selection? Or did you
Oh, how did I get? Yeah. I start with every situation has its own use. I tend to use the pen tool to create a path, and that's for just drawing a hard, sharp, if I need to go like this, make a turn and back, sharp lines. I'll also use brushes, and there's a variety of brushes for hair, beard, a pilly sweater, an animal in this case. So a lot of times I'll make the sharp cutout first and then go back within a brush. Just like if you're oil painting or watercolor, something like that, you make your sharp line first and then you take a dry brush and just like that, and suddenly you have a soft edge. Same thing in Photoshop. It allows you the same tools.
Tablet and the stylus?
Yes. Another part of the biggest benefit of the Wacom tablet is that it allows you to do that. And it allows you to do it. You could do it with a mouse too, but it's very rigid, and there's no nuance to it. How many of you are also artists or painters of any kind other than being photography? Some of you, right? If you only had a razor blade to do, you can't make anything soft. So you need soft tools in order to do that. What I do is a good question. What brushes do I use in Photoshop to achieve those edges? What I will do is, since the Wacom tablet is pressure sensitive, you can set it to be pressure sensitive in terms of opacity and brush size. So I usually choose a medium-sized brush, somewhere in between, but I set it so that the harder I press on the Wacom tablet, the softer it gets and the larger it gets. So by varying my own pressure, going like this or going like that, on the Wacom tablet, I can get a variety of different brush strokes.
Are you working off of the mask when you do that?
Yes, I make the mask first out of a sharp line. So I have a here, let me see what else. I'll show you. Okay, a very sharp cutout. Let's see here. Get rid of these. Okay. Now, and then I adjust it with a brush. Another thing you can do, and the advantage to shooting her against a gray or back screen, or why we use green screen, does anyone use the Magic Wand tool? Okay, couple. For those of you who don't know, Photoshop allows you to take a single tool and hit a little area, and everything that is a close color to that area connected to it will then get selected. So for instance, looking at this gray wall, there's a black frame here, white, different colors. If this were a photo and I were to just touch the gray area, it would select all of this around here, and not that, and that gives me a starting point. Rarely will the Magic Wand tool by itself give me the perfect selection, but it gives me a starting point and allows me to not have to draw around each object. So I'll hit it with the Magic Wand tool, which I'll show you right now here. Magic Wand tool. Let's go here. And just by clicking that, I can set the tolerance to it. It just selects that area. Hold down Shift, get that area. And then what I can do down here, you can add a mask to it. Oops, reverse that. And that's a good starting point. But of course, there's the hand to contend with also, so that I'll have to do by hand. Excuse the pun. So now, okay, so all this is just to get that first paw. Then we have, I'm going in the order that it just happens to be here. The hind leg, same process. Now, the body. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. So there's the front paw and the back leg. Now, the back leg here is actually part of a fuller body of dog, but I wanted it at a particular angle. It was, once we put him on the rocks, his hips didn't look right. He didn't. The realism of him as she would straddle her legs on the rock wasn't believable because she was shot on a square box in the office from a particular angle. All of this was to manipulate her so it looked like we're looking up at her a little bit and she is how her legs would be positioned. So it's a lot of rotation, a lot of moving, and a lot of choosing of different things. Now, okay, so then we have, get rid of that. Then, now here's the piece that has other pieces within. This is the body itself. Get here. Sorry, it's a little small. The majority of the body was done with this group of layers here, this shot. But you can see, that's how we got that position. I didn't even remember that. We had a whole bunch of toys, but this leg here, sorry. This leg here was in a great position. This leg was in a great position. This was clear. One thing I didn't even mention, as she was running around, I couldn't focus fast enough. I got tons of great poses, perfect poses, blurry. Everything had to be on manual focus. My autofocus wasn't fast enough for her, so I had to be constantly zooming in, zooming out, zooming in, zooming out. We used actually the lens that's on the video camera back there. I think it's a 28 to 70, something or other like that. So we had people going, butterscotch over here, and I'm running around, I'm trying to get over here, and my boss is carrying the red camera over here, I'm getting him in half the shots. We had toys everywhere. It was chaos. It was true chaos. But we got this shot here, and we got enough of the other shots to put her together. So this one, as I said, you can see that the harness is khaki. The flag, although the color isn't great, up here you can see it is red, white, and blue. It's gold around the outside. I'm sure you've seen soldiers wearing that sort of patch. The scout patch we had made, and these are all Velcroed on there, so we could, and we only had one of each of them. So if she ran the other way, we had to quickly rip the Velcro off, get it on that side. I have half of them where they're upside down, half of them where I'm like this in the picture. So we had a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. It was a good, and it was all done in about 2 hours. That's about all she had the patience for. That's about all we had the patience for. Okay, so I think this shot we used this leg, the torso, and this leg. We ended up using this leg, but again repositioned it because you could see from this perspective, and if you remember what we want her on the mountain. This leg doesn't quite look right unless there's a divot in the rocks or something. We wanted it, so we needed to cut that. We needed to silhouette out all these little hairs, this little, the Velcro strap, not the Velcro strap, the strap here. Take this leg and shift it up behind her. Okay, and you'll see when I go back to the final image how all this stuff comes together. Okay, so let's turn these back on. This is our dog. But now, with no head. So this is the body as it came out of the camera. Tan fur, khaki harness. Okay, so I'm just going to go right through the layers here. Let's see what we added. This ultimately will be masking out that ear, which was in the way because she was grabbing at a toy, because we need that neck to blend with the head that we're going to use. Other retouching spots. Sorry, some of these are a little bit subtle. Okay, color moves. Now, let's talk about color moves. Have people used levels, curves, or hue and saturation? Yes? Okay. Those three tools are invaluable. We use them constantly, and there's all different things you can do with them. I will tell you that, again, since Photoshop has 6 tools to do 5 things, levels and curves essentially do the same thing, but I will impart to you that curves is the better choice than levels. Some of you may just have a personal preference. I'm not trying to steer you away from what you're comfortable with. But when you're working with large images, for some reason, I don't know how the software was built, levels has to process a lot more information in order to open up and work. And then once you make your levels and hit OK, it has to process again and save it. Curves, as soon as you open up, it's ready to go. You can make all sorts of changes, cancel it, redo it, undo it, and it's much faster. So one little tidbit you can use.
You convert these all into TIFFs or PSDs.
Okay. PSD, which stands for Photoshop Document, all that means is the file can have layers in it. Okay? Once you do all of your work and you've made all your adjustments, and you can see how many layers I have here, and this is a small example. I've done movie posters and things where we have hundreds of layers. Think about, picture an average movie poster in your head that's got 6 people on it and an explosion in the background and a car flying this way. How many different, this is just the dog. This is just the dog. And he doesn't get talent approval. The dog doesn't get to say, I don't like the way my ears look. Please redo it. And I have some stories, I'll get to those as well later on. Thankfully, the client was relatively cooperative with this. He was not really a hard nose, but we get those too, where we do tons of versions and options. They go, well, I don't know. Can you move that foot an inch to the left? And I don't like, well, now let's scrap it and let's get a different dog. What if he was a black dog? Can we make him a black dog? And I go, oh my God.
You were saying
Oh, I'm sorry.
you shoot all of these in RAW. When do you convert from RAW to?
Okay. And again, I apologize for jumping around because I do have a lot of points I'm trying to make. When you open a RAW file in Photoshop, okay, Photoshop, Bridge, or Lightroom, opening a file in RAW is exactly the same in all 3 of them. Bridge and Lightroom do 98% the exact same thing. They are the exact same program. I've been reading up on this recently. I don't use Lightroom. I never have until John mentioned it to me to talk about it tonight. I looked at it for the first time 2 weeks ago. I've never used Lightroom. I use Bridge, which is a very similar program. It allows you to look at a lot of images at once, and you can open up what's called the RAW interface. Any RAW photo that you shoot, you open it up, and you can adjust the exposure, you can adjust the colors, make it more red, more green, brighter, darker, more saturated, less saturated, more vibrant, less vibrant. And I encourage all of you to open up an image that you've shot and just play. Go, what does this do? Oh, that makes it darker. Oh, that makes it brighter. And try it with several images, because just because it makes one darker, you'll watch another one and go, well, it's not quite darker, but it's brighter, sort of, or it's more red. Okay, well, now if and you just have to experiment. Having done this for a long time, I know my settings that I tend to fall back on, but it can do so much. So once you open it in Photoshop and you start adding layers to it, when you want to save it and retain all those layers, you have to save it as a PSD or a Photoshop document. So this way, when you close it and open it up again, all of your layers are there. A TIFF, if you were to save it as a TIFF or a JPEG, all the layers flatten down, disappear, and when you open it up, you have no editability anymore. You could work right on top of it.
When it goes into Lightroom as TIFF, and you bring it back into Photoshop again, you still have the layers, but you don't have the history.
Sorry. TIFF also has layers, but it doesn't have as much editability. You're right. You're right. TIFF, with a lot of the advancements that they've made over the years, they've changed the way some of the formats work. TIFF didn't always, going back several years, TIFF didn't always allow you to keep the layers. Now you're right, now it does. But Photoshop allows you to keep a lot more information that TIFF sort of throws by the wayside.
So you try to do all of your global adjustments in RAW.
You can do your global adjustments in RAW, get it to a good, what you would call a starting point. Say, okay, the exposure is good. I have enough detail in my darks, I have enough detail in my lights, I've gotten the color balance somewhere where I want to start with, then you can open it up, and then you can start retouching and playing and this and that. The nice thing about RAW is that it's what's called non-destructive, which means you can make all those settings, and they're very easy to hit a button and reset, and you haven't ruined the image. You can also open it up several different ways. One of the things that I did here is, and when I get to the head, you'll see, the head shot that I chose was brighter. Maybe she was closer to the light, maybe she was at a different point in the room, whatever it was. The head, you could see it in the fur, was brighter than the rest of the body. So I needed to adjust for that and make it darker. In RAW, when I opened up that frame as opposed to the frame for the body, I needed to take down the exposure a little bit, or add blacks, or make it darker, or add curves, or make whatever adjustments I needed to make until my eye said, okay, those look like they belong on the same dog. Okay? So, moving along to the head. I'm sorry, we're still in the body. Okay, the vest. Now the vest, unfortunately, I can't really zoom in for you to see. Oh, actually here, yes, I can. I'm sorry. Where are our channels? Okay, does everyone know what channels are? No, yes. No, yes. Okay. I have not asked one question that everybody said the same thing, so that's quite all right. That's what I expected. All right. This is called a channel or a mask. And what this is a black and white representation of what you've masked out. Remember I mentioned before about cutting me out so that you can separate me from the background? This is that shape that you can now edit. So for instance, I can, I've cut out this shape using a path. You don't know what paths are, you can draw like a sharp line. But let's say that this end of it I wanted to have, I wanted to make it soft. Sorry. Oh, okay. This, for some reason, it's not letting me edit it. You can go in with all sorts of paintbrush tools and smudging tools and feathering tools and do all sorts of things to this and make it soft. Here, I'll go to here. There we go. Okay. So this is the mask that cuts the dog out. And you can see some of this area is soft, whereas other areas are a little more sharp. This is a little sharp down here. This is very painterly and soft. That's used by, there's a smudging tool, where once you have a sharp line, you can go through and literally go like that, and it's just like if you had pencil on a paper and you just went like that with your finger, smudges it. Great tool, usually a mess, but it works just fine, especially for dog hair. Go ahead, sorry.
So did you mess with this mask after, did you create this mask of the final dog from all the other individual pieces? What's that?
The way to go about it is I build the dog with the gray background because I'm bringing this head that's got a gray background, and I don't bother silhouetting anything except what I need to differentiate it from the other pieces of the dog. So the paw that's going to be over here is going to go actually behind this. So the mask on that paw can be large and rough over here. I don't really care what it looks like. Once I place it behind this part of the dog, at the very end, my last step is to do my finished mask of the entire dog once he's completely assembled. And then I have my finished dog that then I can drop in with the rock and the fire and the type and all that other stuff. Yes? Okay. So, but all these masks, let's go down. We'll see if I have another one. It is, yes. Okay.
Where's the smudge tool?
The smudge tool, if you hit R, for some reason this isn't, you know what, if I make a new document here, 1 second. Let's try this.
Maybe it's in the brushes.
No, for some reason my document, it's not allowing me to really make edits to it. So I'm just going to open up something new just to demonstrate what it is. Maybe, does this mouse work? There we go. All right. There we go. Okay. So let's say, just for instance, I make a shape here. The smudge tool, which if you hit R, it should load it up. It's over here. Oh, there it is. Okay. Paint bucket. No, hand. Sorry, some of the key commands. All right. There's a tool called blur. Okay. There's a blur tool, which, depending on, okay, just softens. And I'll zoom in so you can see that. Okay. Softens the edges. This is the blur tool. Okay. It's not moving it much, but it's just making it softer. Under the same tool, it says here, sharpen, smudge tool. Okay? That will actually push it around, and based on how strong you make it, it will really take it. Whoops, that's too strong. Let's go to 70. The dog hair. Okay? So for instance, and again, I'm using a mouse, which I said I would not do, but that's all that's here, is by going like that, here, I'm going to make a smaller brush, and by playing with the brush size and the strength or intensity of the tool, you'll see I can make fur on this side, and then I use a smaller one for little hairs. Okay? And you can see, exactly, exactly. And I'll talk about doing people's hair because that's, but now suddenly that looks like hair, or enough like hair to get started, okay?
Do you have like a computer, like a Mac Pro or something?
Yes,
Graphics card?
it is a Mac, it's a Mac Pro. It's one of the, they call it the garbage can. It looks like a black canister. It's about 3 years old. But I was just looking at the newer ones. They haven't improved them. That particular model has not improved a little bit. Ours is a 6-core, now it's an 8-core. They add sorts, but it's pretty strong. Also has a lot of memory and a lot of RAM, which those of you who are building up your computers, spend your money on RAM and memory because Photoshop is a memory hog. He's giving me the thumbs up. You can, when you're working on, now it depends. If you're not working on large files, that's great. If you're using a camera that shoots 18, 22 megapixels, something like that, you're going to have some pretty large files. But it also depends on your end use for them. If you're putting them on your website, you don't need to keep them that large. If you're printing them, then you want to hang on to your large files. So it depends what you're using it for. But just to going back to so here, and again, I'm using the mouse, but what you can do for hair is you do that smudge, and then you get a brush, very fine. Now with the Wacom tablet, this will work a lot better, and they will fade out. But then you add a few hairs like that. I apologize, they end a little rough, but by adding little wisps with the Wacom tablet, you can make beautiful hair silhouettes. Okay? There was one point at which I had to do a self-portrait, and this was it's a nightmare to brush. It's more of a nightmare to do Photoshop on. So you can all imagine.
You would have had a better time with Yul Brynner.
You're probably right. Okay, so we're building our dog, right? So we have him here. Let's go back. We've adjusted, okay. So there is, in this area here on the harness, here's I'll show you, hue and saturation, which basically took the color out and made it pure black and white, and then a curves layer to make it darker. And if the curves, make it bright, make it dark, and as I said, rather than layers, curves works faster. You can just see, and this is not a terribly powerful computer. All this happens instantaneously, and you hit OK, and it's done. And it's a large file. Okay. I'm sorry?
You can use the arrow keys too.
Yeah, I know. I'm
A little bit there.
Yep. Okay. So let's see. So we've built up the dog, and then the head. There we go. There she is. Okay. So let's take this, hide that. We'll go to butterscotch here. So there's the shot of the head. And you can see It's actually closer in and a little bit larger than the rest of the body, and certainly looks that way when it's in a square. But when we mask it all out, you'll see the perspective kind of makes sense, and now it's a little bit more believable. But her head is coming forward a little more, and I'm sure at one point we probably showed it to the client with a smaller head, and they said, "Can you make her head bigger?" Sure, we're in Photoshop, no problem. I can take the head. The head's a different piece from the rest of the body anyway, which was the other advantage to building it this way, is that they said, "Oh, can you move that paw? Can you?" Well, they're all separate pieces to begin with. I don't need to start cutting it apart. She's already basically a Lego dog that I've built from nothing.
Do you work with smart objects?
Smart objects. Okay, now, very good question. Do people know what smart objects are? Yes. Yes, no, yes, no. I should just assume that every question is going to be half yes, half no. What a smart object is, and this actually is a smart object, is, I'm going to go back to my other document here. All right. In this document, dog 1, I think it's, or dog 11 or dog 21, I can't remember what I called it. It was probably the frame number out of the camera, is one layer. That dog is one layer in this document. However, there's a little square in the lower right-hand corner of the, right here, there's a little thing like that. That means that this is what's called a smart layer, which means in this document, it's one layer. I can double-click on it, and it opens up a whole separate document with all of my layers. That allows you, then I can bring that smart layer into any other document, scale it up, down, stretch it, color it, do anything I want to it, and I can always double-click it and get back to the original. Now, someone, when I walked in, I don't remember who it was, asked me about retaining resolution on your original photos. There he is, okay? If you take your original photos, you make your adjustments in RAW, whatever it is, you can open that photo as a smart object and stretch it, twist it, skew it, scale it, do anything you want to it. As long as you leave it on a separate layer as a smart object, you can always click back to the original, and you will always retain the maximum resolution that came out of the camera. So if you shoot, your camera takes a picture and it's 5,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels. You bring it into a document and you scale it down to the size of a postage stamp at 72 dpi for your website. And you save it, but you save layers. You go, oh, you know what, I want to edit it, but now it's only like 6 pixels wide. I can't do anything with it anymore. Double-click it, the original opens up. You can make all your new adjustments, save that smart layer, and it's back in your small document again. Good question. Okay, so that's called a smart layer. It allows you to compress and hide all the information that's in one document inside another, and it's a separate layer that can be moved on its own, but there's always the chance to re-edit it and open it up somewhere else. It's one file. It in effect embeds a hidden file inside another file. And the other advantage to that is, I believe, you can also make a smart layer out of your RAW settings, which means you can open up in Lightroom, Camera Raw, or Bridge, make your RAW settings, save that as a smart layer, mess around in Photoshop, and go, you know what, I don't like the exposure that I did on that. I think I added too much red. You can go back to the original, shift your red, and go right back, and all the retouching that you did automatically comes back. Huge time saver. Okay, how are we doing on time?
I don't know if normal people look at it this way, but
We're not normal people, it's okay.
the thing that bothers me is the shadow on the side of the dog's head doesn't match the shadow on the side of the dog's paw. It looks like two different lighting.
Yes.
So, do you fix that? Or?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. She's going to get thrown with fire in front of her. There's type to distract the eye. This thing is due tomorrow. You know, there are considerations. There are times when it's critical. And we've had things where we had to do a head swap or a body double for a person, where the head is lit harsh from this side and the body is lit harsh from this side. That's unacceptable. We have to find a workaround, adjust it, do something, choose a different body, whatever it is. Here with a dog, there's lighting all over the place. I know he's going to be engulfed in flames or in red and orange and yellow, and it's just the paw, I'll let that go. Unless somebody tells me you got to fix that. My eye, I'm okay with it. Yes, the body is lit from the back, the head is lit from the left, that paw is lit kind of from the front. There's a lot of lighting in there. But again, it's passable because of the end usage. Okay, so now we've done all our adjustments on the dog, and we have it in this one smart layer in our book cover document. So again, we have our backgrounds, we have our dog, we have our adjustments, and we have our type. And that's how you build a piece of commercial artwork from the ground up, starting with a raw photo, chasing a dog around the room, ending up with something that's saleable. Go ahead.
Could you make that dog layer invisible?
Oh, sure. Sure. Okay, so there it is without the dog. Yeah. Okay, I'll do this. So here's, sorry, okay, there we go. There's still a lot of layers. I can break it down even further, everything we did to build the fire and all, but you see it's a combination of just things over layers over layers over layers. Now, I'll talk about one other thing quickly, which is layer modes. There's a little drop-down menu here on your layers palette. It says pass through, and there's a long list: darken, multiply, color burn, lighten, screen. Has anybody experimented with and used those and know what they do? Yes and no. I should stop asking questions. Okay. The blending modes, exactly. Okay. For those who don't know, you can take a layer that is on top of other layers and affect how it reacts with what is beneath it. So what I mean by that is, okay, so we're looking at the dog here. Right now, the dog is on normal, which means whatever's in that dog image, that's what you're going to see. If I put it on darken or multiply, if I put it on multiply, it will only darken what's behind it. All of the lights of the dog disappear out, and it's only darker than what is beneath it. So if I move her around, you can see it's almost like an ink stamp or something like that. Okay? If I go to lighten and screen or similar, screen, her darks drop out. Okay, whoops, sorry. Something's moving around. Thank you. There we go. Okay, so, and I encourage all of you to experiment with these and see what they do. And they will do different things with different images. Lighten and screen, I'm sorry?
Did you put little drop shadows under each paw so it looks like she's standing on different?
Yes, I did. They may be.
I tried that, and if you just use like a layer style of drop shadow, it looks like you push it around the whole thing.
A lot of times you can't just paint black, because shadows in the real world are not black. They are a darker version of what is beneath them. So, and it also, shadows have color as well. If you have a very yellow light, you'll tend to get a blue shadow. If you have a very red light, the shadows will go green, opposite on the color spectrum. So you need to keep that in mind as well and experiment. So sometimes you'll paint in a black shadow, and you go, that's really harsh. Sometimes taking down the opacity is enough. Sometimes you have to use a blue, or sometimes you have to use a really dark brown, but a reddish kind of brown. And depending on the color of the environment and the color of the object that it's casting the shadow on, you need to adjust for that as well. How we do it?
You adjust the color for the dog
Oh.
to match the color of the background.
Great. Okay. I'm going to go to my history here. I'm sorry? Everybody okay? Okay. That's okay. I'm trying to give a taste, and I realize that there is a variety of ability in the room. Some people will, okay. So, but for the question was asked about adjusting the color on the dog. There we go. I have a folder here I called FX, EFX, right there. And within that folder, I have curves and layers and tons and tons of stuff. Here, there's bits of fire, there's curves and layers, all different things, and layer masks that all affect everything that is beneath it. So there are some layers, what they call adjustment layers. There are some adjustment layers I did behind the dog, some I did just to the dog, and some I did over everything. That the term I use, it marries it together. It makes a cohesive color scheme to the whole thing that gives it all this red, orange, and yellow that makes it look like this dog is really in that place. Because if everything is warm and fiery and hot and red and orange and yellow, and she's very bluish, she's going to look out of place. She needs that red, orange, yellow as well to look like she's actually in that place. Okay.
How big is this file in megabytes and how wide is it in terms of?
Okay. Question was how big is this file in terms of file size and in terms of dimensions? This one is not tremendous because this is a book cover that's ultimately going to be, I think, 5 by 7. This isn't being used for a poster. When I do poster work, we'll usually work full size 27 by 40 at 300 DPI and with hundreds of layers that can get pretty sizable. This is, and I did simplify the file a little bit to bring here tonight, but I will tell you that, where is it? Image size? Okay, so this is 7.5 by 10.5 at 100, that's right, I sized it down because I didn't know what kind of machine was going to be here. At 120 DPI, the original is 300. So, but if I were to go to 300, it's 20 megabytes, not tremendous. But again, that's because of the usage. It's only going to ever get printed 5 by 7 or 6 by 8. This book publisher doesn't ask us for larger files for posters or any other promotional things. It's just the cover.
So sometimes you can get a file that's a couple of gigs.
Yeah, a couple of gig, yep.
The firefighter text is behind the head.
Mm-hmm.
So I
How?
don't know if I've ever done that.
Okay. The question was, how did I get the dog in front of the firefighter type? A Photoshop document is essentially a pancake. You have bottom and top, which you can think of as front to back. Your bottommost layer in the palette there is furthest from you. The top layer is closest to you. And by simply shuffling those around, one thing can come in front of another. So for instance, just as I can take this group that's called type, if I bring this higher in the list, it comes in front of the dog. All the way to the front, it comes in front of all the coloring. And by shifting that around, putting it back, that's all it is. That's all it is. If I have my hand, take a look. If I have this hand silhouetted, and this is on a layer, and this is on a layer, if I put this layer in front, you see that. If I put this layer in front, you see that. And that's all there is to it. Mm-hmm.
So the bottom is furthest?
Yes, the bottommost layer is furthest from you. The topmost layer is closest to you. Okay? Good question. Thank you. All right. I'm going to, and I certainly don't mind asking questions as we go. I'm going to jump out of this because this is a great example of a lot of different techniques in Photoshop. And if you will have me, I will be happy to come back again and do a more technical breakdown of some of these things, more advanced concepts. But I'm just going to go back to where I started here. There we go. Okay, so that's Scout. Go ahead.
One more question.
No, please.
Do you use any of
Whoop.
the
There we go. Yes. That's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
any of the tools that you can change the form?
Change the form.
Well, transform, but there's like a warp type.
Yes. Pulling the ears. I mean, to use this as an example, if this, I don't remember, I think the paw was pretty much where we wanted it, but if we needed to stretch it, if we needed to twist it this way, within reason, there's a lot of things you can do. As I roll through, I have some other examples that include something along those lines.
Do you use Nick?
Sorry?
Do you use Nick?
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 I'm not sure I know what that,
Plug-in. Plug-in.
never heard of it.
Nick
Nick?
Nick?
No, what is it?
Like
I'm
the
always-
Visa and,
No, I guess a plug-in. What?
It's black and white. It's black.
No. It's a, you know what? Okay. I never used Lightroom ever, really, even just looking at it a couple weeks ago. Someone in this room, someone else may say, I swear by it. That's the greatest thing I've ever used. You should check it out. You should try it. I'm always open to hear about new things. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a few more pieces of work, talk briefly about how some of them were done, and then we can just keep going with Q&A. Okay, so this was Scout. Here was, I don't remember the usage for this, but this was a model that I shot. And again, just like Scout, she was shot again.
You smudged her hair.
It's a lot of hair, a lot of challenge there. She was shot against a gray background in a studio with studio lights, just hit her from the side. You could see that the light was, hits the sides of her cheeks. I lit her on this side and that side. Bang, she was against gray. Pulled her out, added, and she was, just the natural color in the room. All the coloring gets done afterwards to marry her with the background the same way, the same exact technique that we used for Scout. And then the background is a series of stock photos, the mountain and the sky and the birds. I think the mountain was one shot, the sky was another 2 or 3 shots, and then the birds were either computer generated or another stock shot of just birds flying in a blue sky. But you marry it all together and you can get all sorts of fun things.
With an art director at the same time?
Yeah. Sometimes I am the art director. Some of these, as I roll through them, are just personal projects, things I've tried. I think this was a favor that I did. This was a model that I knew, and she wanted something like this done. So, something we collaborated on. I actually had those swords, and they are plastic. And I just placed them in her hand, and that was it. But I've done other ones, similar types of things, where we've added weapons and props that I don't have, that we either computer generate using 3D programs or use stock. You can find stock photos of samurai swords and, whatever, things like that.
I saw a picture on Match.com.
Yeah, I'll get you her number.
Stock photos, a different resolution.
Good question. The resolution of stock photos. If you go to a reputable stock photo site, and I have some links list I'll give you at the end, they are all reproduction quality. They are the worst of them is much better than you'll need, and then they go up. There are some that, if you're lucky enough, that the photographer shot it with a very high-end camera, and you can get some really, really good.
Doesn't the resolutions have to match if you combine them?
Okay, question was, do the resolutions have to match? And the answer is no. If you have, think of it as a grid of pixels, okay? If this image of her, let's say, was shot at, just to make the math easy, 100 pixels by 200 pixels, and I get the sky that's 300 pixels by whatever, I can shrink it in Photoshop, and by making it a smart layer, I don't eliminate any of the information, and I can scale it right into where I want, make the sky bigger and smaller. The resolution just determines how big it is when I bring it in. And when I set up my document at a particular resolution, then I bring in all my different elements. Some things I need to enlarge, some things I need to shrink, until I get the composition that I want. Okay.
Shrinking it, would it still be 300?
What's that?
Would it still be 300?
You would start, if my document is 300, yeah. And it stays editable. So if I shrink it way down and then I decide, you know what, I want to make it bigger again, all that information is still in there with a smart layer. Okay.
And then when you flatten it,
When you flatten it, you lose everything. So what I do for my pieces of artwork is I save a layered version and I save a flat version. Flat version is for generally sending to print, whether it's my own printer or sending it out to a printer. They don't need all the layered, tremendous file. But I always keep my layered file, so if I ever need to go back and re-edit it again, I've got all my original stuff in there, just like Scout. That layered document will not go to the client. They will just get a flat version ready to send to the printer. They'll send it off and it'll get done. But I know if they call back and say, oh, you know what, we need to take the flag thing off. Now we don't want to have a flag on them. I say, okay, I have the layered. I'll just take that off and resend it out again. Go ahead, sir.
I have a question on printing.
Please.
You had just said flatten when you print. If you don't flatten your PSD file,
You
is there a difference between flattening it and not flattening?
Takes longer for the printer to process. Some printers will interpret the color a little bit differently. Most don't, but depending on what kind of printer you have. And I'm speaking about generally home printers or something you could buy for yourself. I'm sorry? Without knowing a model name, but I'm assuming it's a printer for home. You're not talking about a $1 million industrial printer. Yeah, it's you may, if you want to set something to print and go eat dinner and come back, it'll be done. If you flatten it, it'll just get there quicker. That's all. When I send files out to other people to have them be printing it, I don't want to send them their layers because they can invariably, not through malice, something can get moved around because it's all editable. They open something up and somebody spills their coffee on a thing or they go like that and they don't realize it and now the dog is over here. Why give them the opportunity? As I mentioned before, TIFFs can hang on to layers, but they get very large, very large.
So you should
You flatten. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Going back to printing.
Yep.
I've been told and I find that if I want the print to approximate the computer-generated screen, I actually have to add some light brightness and maybe even
Yes.
a little contrast to
Okay.
it in order to print it closer to what I get on my computer.
The comment/question was about matching color from your monitor to your piece of paper. And what you have to understand is they work completely opposite from each other. Paper starts with white and adds color to it to make it darker. A monitor, if you don't turn it on, is black, and the more you turn it on, it gets brighter. So it's the difference between what they call additive color and subtractive color. Additive, I forget which is which, but basically you understand the concept. So the colors will never match flawlessly. Your best bet is to know your monitor, know your printer. Some people go, I know my printer, it's a little bit blue. So I take a little blue out of the file because I know my printer. When we do stuff professionally, we hope and expect that things are color balanced well, but it's never perfect. Even my monitors, great as they are, they don't match the printer. So what happens? We get a proof back from them. And we go, okay, this is too red. We'll take some red out, send it along. For many years, I did a lot of work for newspaper. Newspaper is like printing on toilet paper. Anyone who's held a newspaper, it's garbage. This ink soaks into it. It's off-white to begin with. It's not even bright white to begin with, like just New York Times, something like that. So we would have a whole series we actually had a special piece of software that changed the color from what you see on your monitor to something that should print. It was put out by the New York Times. And we used it, and because that's where most of our ads went, which was satisfactory for most other papers in the country.
We're talking about dot gain.
Sorry? Dot gain. Yep. Dot gain, again, not making this a printing class, but when ink hits the paper, it spreads. Very, very good paper, it doesn't spread that much. Again, newsprint, it's basically toilet paper. It's like dropping a piece of watercolor on it, it just goes zoom.
So does the book publisher get an RGB image or CYMK?
Okay, I'm going to say, some people know RGB and CMYK. RGB is red, green, and blue, and is lights. Those are the lights in your monitor. This thing spits out R, G, and B. You can actually see them a little bit on my hand when I go like this. If you go up, even modern televisions, but tubes, it was even easier. If you were to go up right to a TV and you didn't burn your eyes out, you could see the little red, green, blue, red, green, blue, red, green, blue. That's how the color is made. When something is printed on a piece of paper, it's generally cyan, which is a light blue, magenta, which is a pink, yellow, and black, and that gives you your color on paper. Again, two different models. So yes, but the short answer is when we send something out for printing, it's got to be CMYK. I'm just going to roll through a few other images here. Some of them are a little racy, but you get the idea. We add all sorts of photo. This was shot a couple of years ago, but suddenly looks like a old tattered photo because of textures that you can add to it. Taking the yellow out of the darks and adding them to the lights gives a very warm, tactile, old kind of quality to it. Same sort. Photoshop right here. This building is on 29th Street between 7th and 8th Avenues, and directly across the street from it is a big apartment building. Took that out and put her in a nice place in Manhattan. But we're on the 11th floor. and it's just a building right next to it. But simply by stripping it out and putting that back there, marrying the colors together, that becomes a believable shot that she's on a really tall building. Which,
Something like that, how would you judge the scale? Because the scale, if I stay
it's way out of scale is how I would judge it. She is, I guess if you were to think about it, she's probably in the Bronx by this point. She's up there. Or maybe right in the middle of Central Park. I don't know where that perspective would have been shot. Although, then again, that stock photo had to have been photographed from somewhere, unless it was taken from a helicopter or something. So most likely the photographer was standing on a building somewhere uptown. But yeah, so, okay, but much safer than actually photographing her that high up. Okay, this one, salacious as it is, everybody sees this photo of mine, they go, how on earth did you get her to do that and capture that moment? Very fast camera, very great lighting. She got it. She's laying down. Okay? And there were windows at the top, that end of the room. The natural light coming in made it seem like she was being lit from the top, like by ceiling lights. And by taking, I'm just going to back and forth, right? Very believable that she's up in the air. So some people I lie and I say, yeah, we got her to fly through the air. Other people I go, nope, it's just Photoshop. That's all it is. And then the hair silhouetting, again, I can do a whole nother night on hair silhouetting, but a lot of the techniques that the magic wand, the smudge, and painting with little brushes, and you can silhouette it out. I'll roll through okay, now, some celebrity stories. Everybody always loves these. Whitney Houston, yes. This was a concert, well, certainly younger, she's no longer with us, but I think this was 1998, 1999 maybe. HBO was having a concert of hers, and I was not the photographer on this, but I did do the Photoshop work. I was working for an agency, HBO was one of our clients, and they told us we're going to have a Whitney Houston concert. We're setting up a photo shoot. They flew in a photographer and his entire crew from Paris, rented a studio and built this whole set with the white columns. They bought a Vera Wang dress, I think was $25,000. We had it, everything was set, and she didn't show up.
What?
She's just decided she wasn't coming that day. Or so we thought. Those of you who follow the tabloids or did back then, she and Bobby Brown had a fight. She had a nice big shiner. She just didn't call to say, I don't feel well. She just didn't show up. So with this very expensive photographer, we had him shoot a white room for an hour and then fly back to Paris. And a couple of weeks later, now of course they were under deadline because we have this concert coming up. A couple of weeks later, they tracked her down in LA, found a dress off the rack, found a photographer in a matter of hours, rented a studio, and shot her. She was like this. They got a great pose. However, she still had remnants of the black eye. She had a lot of stubble. She had all sorts of other imperfections. And they handed these shots to us and said, make it look great. So what we had to do was smooth out the skin under her arm, fix the black eye under her eye, all sorts of other retouching things. There were wrinkles in the dress. This was not a $25,000 dress. This was a $100 dress, and whatever it was made of. And it was a tremendous amount of work, but we pulled it off, and it looks like she was shot by the photographer that they hired. I love telling that story. It is. Okay.
Doesn't a company like HBO have like a whole department of art directors and people who can do this stuff?
Question is, does HBO have a whole department of people who can do this stuff? Most clients, or rather most companies, at least in the entertainment division, they have in-house art departments that do, and I don't want to say it this way, more menial tasks, and they hire out for creative to agencies. There are boutique agencies. I used to work for a very small agency. Now I'm with a larger one. They would hire out so that they would get different looks for different assignments. If they have an art department with 6 guys and ladies sitting there, eventually you get the same aesthetic over and over and over again. They say, okay, well, this agency is really good at this genre. This agency is good at that. Let's go to them this time. Well, we've given them a lot of business this year. They've been really good to us. And it's business like any other business. but they generally don't have their creative teams in-house. There are a few exceptions. I work for one right now. We do work for Showtime. Showtime has a big in-house art department that they do a lot of the creative under their roof. And we do other work for them. But, you know, everyone operates differently. This is something we did for HBO. I don't know, I can't really zoom into it. But that's a composite of, I couldn't tell you how many images. I can't even make them all out anymore. This was a show, this one actor right in the middle, he plays every part in the show. That's actually the old woman standing behind him in the green shirt, that's him. The African-American guy down at the bottom, that's him. The Asian woman on the left, that's him. He does all the parts. So we had all these different photos of him, and we needed to make a composite that looked like it was an exciting show. Okay. This was another thing I did for HBO a while back. Not big in terms of silhouetting and separating out, but if you can see his skin, we made like a football skin. So it's, I think it was on overlay or multiply. One of the things was just laying that, getting a photo of a football, photo of the guy, just lay it right over him and adjust the colors a little bit, and it just married so nicely. Of course, the brown of his skin matched the brown of the football, so it was just added to the believability of it.
Lay it all over him. What was the process?
Just like I did with the fire and stuff. One layer was his face. It might not be this simple. It was probably a little more complicated than this, but essentially, one layer is a photo of his face, one layer is a photo of a football, gets put onto him, and then some adjustment layers to push the contrast in the color, and that's all it really took. And then, of course, adding the stitching thing on top of it. Relatively simple, but a very effective. I think this ad won a couple of awards. It was really well received. And my boss said I did a good job. That's all I cared about.
In Photoshop, there's a layer style menu.
Yes.
Have you ever used that?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, where you have multiply, they call them blending modes.
Layer style.
Oh, yes, layer styles. I tend not to. In my opinion, they tend to have an unsophisticated look, most of them. But like with any other toolbox, sure, every once in a while I find something in there, then I make use of it. A lot of things for adding glows on stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends. Sometimes it looks like it wasn't really done, it was done amateurishly, to make up a word. But we try to use the best tool that we can find to achieve the look that we're looking for. But yeah, it's one more tool in the toolbox. This was fun. We got a shot of the White House. We got a shot of, and this was back when people actually had radios like that. So we got shots of the speakers, shots of the White House, silhouetted out everything, and then added the color, red on one side, blue on the other. And this was going back away. This was Clinton was in the White House when we did this one. But he hosted, you know, being a big music and jazz guy that he was, they hosted a big Christmas party with a lot of artists there. And it was just a very fun, kind of conceptual way to show music at the White House without it being stuffy and, you know, just kind of playful. Okay, this was a fun one. Now, we had two ways to achieve this, and we actually did both of them. We came up with a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is in Cleveland. They opened an annex down in, I want to say Soho, so not far from here, I think. I forget exactly where it is. 76 Mercer, there you go. So we came up with all sorts of concepts about rock and roll and New York. And I could take you through all of them, but just to show as an example, so what's more New York than pizza, right? So we came up with an idea. We go, what if we made a pizza in the shape of a guitar? So we got a stock photo of pizza, straight down, just circular, and we cut pieces of it and made, here's my little pointer. So this was the outside curve of one. This, we took the crust from this side and added it onto the, you know, chopped that out, added some, and anyone plays guitar, the four little volume knobs and things, so we put little pepperonis there. You know, you have a little fun with it, right? So, this over here, it's just a slice of pizza just cut out from it. Just a slice, you know? So, and then it gets a little dark. Yet we have, like, I think we have garlic knots up here or something. We did, you know, kind of had some fun. So we presented this idea. Now, this idea did not go